Beautiful 14-year-old daughter, and I'm also the guardian of two of my nieces. I was born in Boston to my parents, John and Esther, who are first and second generation immigrants from Ireland and Barbados. So I'm a biracial woman. And I was raised, though, after about being 2 years old, living in Boston, we moved to Cambridge. My family moved to Cambridge. And my mom is the oldest of 11 children, very, very large family. All of my aunts and uncles lived throughout Boston on both sides of my family, West Roxbury, South Boston, Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, everywhere. And so we spent a lot of time with all of our cousins. Also, I have worked really hard at making sure that I am committed to communities that look like me.
Right.
Immigrant communities, communities of color, and throughout my entire life, my parents have been Boston public school teachers.
Okay. Oh,
They
awesome.
have combined 60 years of service in the Boston public schools, and they are both retired now, which is wonderful. But I've always been going to various schools throughout Boston, visiting my parents, or getting involved in some of the things that they were handling. They were in the teachers union, etc. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm the oldest of 5 children. I went to law school after getting a full scholarship to go to college.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
And I played a sport called lacrosse, which I did not even know what that was before I got to the school that I went to.
And the funny thing is, as I stated in my past broadcast, I went to a medical school,
Oh, yeah.
Dover, Sherborne, and that's when I was introduced to the sport
lacrosse.
Lacrosse.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never heard about it before then.
Neither did I. So I ended up at Buckingham, Brown and Nichols in 4th grade and ended up graduating from there. I was fortunate enough to do well in sports and school, and got a scholarship to go to college. And through an incident or some incidents that happened there, some female athletes realized that our teams were cut due to budget cuts,
Okay.
and our men's football team hadn't won a game in several years, and they got to keep all 75 of their full scholarships.
Wow.
So we threatened a Title IX lawsuit and got our team reinstated, and that was one of the things that proved to me how important lawyers are, and advocacy and standing up for yourself.
Right.
And that was a purely gender-based claim, but it really started my sort of passion for advocating for people that are overlooked, forgotten, or silenced in some way. And that's really what started my career to be a lawyer.
Wow, that's excellent. Where have you worked in the past?
Oh, so first of all, I'm old, so I'm 47.
You're
so
young.
I've had a lot of different jobs, but I have my first job was clerking on the Mass Appeals Court.
Okay.
So after I got out of law school at Northeastern University School of Law, I worked for a black judge there. The only black judge that at the time on the appeals court, because the other one had just moved up to the Supreme Judicial Court. And after that, I got a master's in law at Georgetown, and I worked for the federal government in Boston at a place called the National Labor Relations Board. Mm-hmm. And my sole focus was investigating employers that were mostly preying on undocumented, poor employees of color,
Right.
who were trying to unionize, and or even if they weren't trying to unionize, they were trying to get better wages, hours, and working conditions.
Okay.
And they would be fired, they would be threatened with deportation, they would be threatened with any other type of things. And what we did as the federal government was we went in and we investigated it, and we got their jobs back, we got them back pay, we got the employers in some circumstances fined, and we got postings all over the employment location saying we will not sort of violate the law any longer. What was great about that job for me is being a visible person of color and going into Chelsea and other areas where there was a large undocumented population of Latinx individuals and some black undocumented people as well. was I was allowed in their house because when I knocked on the door, I looked like somebody who could be in their family.
Or that they can relate.
Or they could relate to.
Right.
And whether, my Spanish is not very good, but it was good enough to get in the door.
Right.
I did not speak, or aside from sac passe, I couldn't say much else, but I could smell delicious food and I would
Right.
be
As a
invited.
Haitian person,
Yes.
I understand what you mean.
You bet. So my point is simply that when I look at them and say, I know I'm the government, we are not here to discuss your
Right.
status or anything about your immigration or how you got here. I want to know whether you were treated fairly or not. They believed me.
Right.
There were colleagues of mine that would knock on the door and show their badge and the door wouldn't open. That is why we as people of color, we as poor people, we as immigrants, we as often forgotten or other people, we deserve to work for this government as well.
Absolutely.
This government works for us. Our tax dollars pay for this government. So when I hear people saying, oh, why would you choose to work for the federal government? Because they deserve to hear what I have to say about what they're doing.
Right.
And I believe you can make a lot of change behind the wall as you can make across the V,
That's
right?
absolutely
like
true.
as a defense attorney or as a prosecutor or working for this government that's supposed to work for us.
Yeah, and it's important for people to know there's a slogan, them versus us, and it's important to try to break that cycle because the same opportunity you have, I can too.
Yeah.
I just need to work hard and make an impact once I get that opportunity to work for the government.
Yeah.
That's why it's very important for me to continue this broadcast to kind of educate the community as far as what's going on. These are the things that are going on. You have the right to know, and your voice count, and you need to speak up.
Right.
And that's why I think it's very important as a woman of color with a lot of different backgrounds that you are running for the Suffolk County District Attorney's office, because people need to know about you. People need to know what you've done. People need to know what your career was like, so that if, God willing, you become the next district attorney, they want to know that what you say you're actually going to do, and
Absolutely.
you can actually relate to them.
Sure. And so that NLRB, that National Labor Relations job, was my first job, and that was a prosecutorial job there. And then I went to a firm called Bingham McCutcheon, and I learned how to, how to defend large companies, but I did a lot of pro bono work, meaning free legal work
right.
for good causes. And I was excited during that time to also do what they call as a district attorney rotation, where my law firm sent me to Brockton, Plymouth County, and I learned at the feet of great assistant district attorneys while being paid by my firm to learn. And I spent about 5 months learning and being an assistant district attorney at the feet of these ADAs. And that was wonderful. While I was at Bingham, I worked with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and we ended up suing the city of Boston and the Boston Police Department for race discrimination, because Latino or Latinx and Black officers were being disciplined more frequently than their white counterparts. And so that's part of what I'm excited about, in the sense that I have great relationships with law enforcement. I have family members that are in law enforcement,
Right.
but I also have family members that have struggled with addiction and bad choices and cycled in and out of the criminal justice system. So I have no problem holding the police accountable when they aren't doing what it is they're sworn and duty bound
Right.
to do. So at Bingham, I was working with Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. I left there to become a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I did both civil and criminal work. And then I left there to become the first person of color to be the general counsel of the Mass Department of Transportation, and the first woman to be the general counsel of the T, and did that for 2 years, and then was at Massport for about a little over 2 years, nearly 3 years, and then ended up doing a program at Harvard Business School, and now I'm excited to run for office.
That's great.
Yeah.
How important was it for you to become the first woman of color to work for the general counsel for the MBTA?
Yeah, so I was the first woman, white or other, to be the general counsel of the MBTA. It's very exciting. We as women are not appropriately represented, I think, in the leadership in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate to have the Attorney General,
Yes.
the Auditor bump. We have a Lieutenant Governor. We've never had a female governor. We've never had a female mayor. What's beautiful is we have Andrea Campbell and I think 6 women of color on the Boston City Council. We also have Chelsea City Councilor Vido, I believe is how you pronounce her name, is a woman of color as well. So we are making strides, but I believe that we are not adequately represented. And it was a huge honor for me to be the first. And even more important, though, was I brought up lots of other qualified people with me, because when we have an opportunity to be the first, if we leave there without making it better for other people, and or setting up a system whereby a plan whereby they, somebody is going to replace me that is, a highly qualified man who is, who is inclusive of everyone and the most qualified person, or a woman or a person of color that are also qualified, whatever it is, whomever it is that is replacing me, I need to make sure I've thought about that. Because that's unfortunately times women get into positions, people of color get into positions, and of course, remember, we're double minorities. We are women and people of color. That we forget, that there are others struggling behind us, and what are we doing to make sure that we're using our position of power to help as many people as we can. And what I like to say that I'm excited about is I've been the president of the Mass Black Lawyers Association. When I started law school, it was almost like every different affinity group was fighting against each other for the crumbs that we could all get. What's beautiful now is I think we're realizing that with MAHA, the Mass Association of Hispanic Attorneys, or ALAM, Asian American, all of the different affinity groups, and our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, I feel like we are now banding together to say, what can we all get to make sure that we're inclusive of each other? Because to me, I'm very happy if a person, if a Latino man gets the job, or a transgendered person gets an opportunity, or whatever the other affinity group is, that helps us all because we're getting different perspectives. So I think I'm very excited about the fact that I was able to be the first, because then there was one right after me, and then it was no longer about me being the first because Paige Scott Reed was right behind me. Or when I left Massport, I'm so proud that Katie McDonald was my interim when I left, and then became the chief legal counsel of Massport, and is now the chief of staff. This is, she's not a woman of color, but she's a very qualified woman. We are changing the face of what leadership looks like around Massachusetts, and I'm really proud of the work that I've done with respect to that.
That's awesome. And also I think it's very important because we have young girls who are growing up in the community, and when they see these things, it's okay for them to want to pursue long-term career goals. It's okay to go into the law field, because I don't think there is enough minorities that I've seen in Boston that are attorneys and that are representing the community. I may be wrong, but I haven't seen as many as I should or as I would like to see. But I think it's a good example for the young children who's coming after us to see, oh wow, we have this young beautiful woman, she's in a position of leadership, and then that's when our voice is heard. That's when we're able to do certain things and make sure things can be changed. Working for the Attorney General Maura Healey, and as well as former Governor Patrick, how has it shaped you to your career now? Like, how has it helped you become the person that you are to run for the DA's office?
Sure. Governor Patrick was wonderful to me, and he appointed the Secretary of Transportation, who then hired me as the first woman, in my jobs at MassDOT and the T. But Governor Patrick also appointed me to something called the Judicial Nominating Commission, the JNC, which is 21 people across all of Massachusetts, and we vet candidates for the bench to be judges. Every single type of judge that there is, from housing court or clerks of court all the way up to the Supreme Judicial Court, we can be asked to weigh in on. And so Governor Patrick instilling that confidence in me to be one of the very few people of color on that commission, and held with such an important task as deciding who, or vetting these individuals to then say, you know, Governor Patrick, this is who we think should be put on the bench, and he gets to decide from our group who he's going to select. So that was just a big honor. And then with the Attorney General, Healy, we were colleagues or peers when she was the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Attorney General's office. When I was at the U.S. Attorney's office as a federal prosecutor, I was in the Civil Rights Division or unit at the U.S. Attorney's office. So we handled a few matters together before she elevated up to the position she is. So I consider her a friend, and she has a seat on her advisory committee on racial equity and justice for the NAACP, and the president of the NAACP, where I volunteer as the chair of legal redress, appointed me there. So I get an opportunity to work with the Attorney General. She had to approve that it was me. Yes. So it's a very humbling experience, but you have such a big megaphone when you're dealing with a governor and an Attorney General, and have their ear to say, you know, Attorney General Healy, this is what all of the 3 criminal justice reform bills that are currently pending, this is what they're talking about. We believe you need to be more vocal on these 3 issues because they disparately impact racial minorities, which are overwhelmingly immigrants, you know, like the people that I come from, right? So, or women, you know, whatever, it's racial justice and equity. And I know racial is before those words, but justice and equity are for everyone. And so when we look at disparate impacts of any group of people, we need to talk out loud and be vocal about those. So I feel blessed that not only are my hands getting dirty as the chair of legal redress for the Boston branch of the NAACP, meaning I'm receiving the complaint calls every day from our constituents that have real concerns and questions, and we can walk them through the process, but also at the highest level, we're talking to the Attorney General, and I'm no longer on the JNC because Governor Patrick now works at Bain Capital. And but when I was there, to have the ear of the governor or the Attorney General, to have our voices heard, is really valuable and important. And that is why we need the grassroots, but we also need people at every single level sort of singing the same song so that we can make change.
Excellent. We're going to take a short break, and then we will come back to learn more about you.
Sure.
And again, thank you for coming in.
You bet.
Thank you for tuning in Voice of Reason Boston, and we have our special guest, Rachael Rollins. She is talking about the reason why she's running for the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, and also to help us learn more about her. I would like to send a special thanks to James Civil. He sent me a question, and I would advise any other person who's tuning in, if you have any questions, definitely email me, and I can certainly try to answer them. One of the questions that he sent was, do you find any disparity when African Americans were being disciplined more at the MBTA like the Boston Police?
Great question. When I started as the general counsel of the MBTA and MassDOT, it was the first time in the history of both of those organizations. Remember, MassDOT was a very newly formed organization, but the MBTA is the oldest transportation system in the country. So they came under one umbrella, and for the first time in the history of both organizations, there was one lawyer running both organizations. And what I was seeing was disciplines coming in from different sectors of the T that would be the same incident with really different results. So let's say hypothetically, you know, insubordination or, you know, being late for your job. One union might give a verbal warning on the first time. One union might give a written warning on the first time. For bigger things like, operating under the influence outside of work, or something, a physical altercation on the job. One union might give 1 day suspension, others might be terminated. And so what I put in place as the general counsel, which was not in place before, was any disciplines 5 days or over must come to me, and we had a group of people, and it changed every time. It would be the head of HR for the T,
Okay.
the head of HR for MassDOT, myself, who was the lawyer for both, the union steward for whatever the union was, the supervisor that issued the discipline, and then maybe 1 or 2 other people. Because what I would want to look at is I would want to say, well, if it's SEIU versus the Teamsters, if it's a purely collective bargaining difference, right? So
Right.
if their unions had negotiated for them better outcomes, it would be hard for me to do that, but I was started keeping information about, well, why is it though that whenever it appears to be a person of color, predominantly black or Latinx, that the disciplines are harder,
Right.
or that the unions that are overwhelmingly non-minority unions have the best outcomes for their bargaining structure or members.
Okay.
And so those were the type of things that I was speaking with the Mass Commission Against Discrimination about, to take a look and to see what was really happening was all of these different siloed groups of these of the T and MassDOT were finally speaking to each other and realizing, oh, well, we had no idea that you did that as well. There was no one person negotiating all of the collective bargaining agreements to say, this is ridiculous.
Right.
How come if I punch someone in the face in this unit, I get 1 hour suspension, but if I get in a physical altercation here, I'm fired? Let's try to get, when we negotiate all of our collective bargaining agreements, the same type of disciplines, progressive disciplines in each of them. Very hard task to do, but for sure I saw the difference. But what was nice was working with the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights, legal department, the HR departments, and then all the supervisors. We finally got the right people around the table so that I could say, so tell me, how many other disciplines like this have happened in the last year? What's the breakdown? Are they male, female? What are their ages? Because there are all these different protected categories we have to think about.
Right.
If you're only disciplining people 40 or under, or 40 or over, that's a protected category, 40 or over. Or only disciplining, individuals that have said that they are, said that they are gay, lesbian, bisexual, right? We need all the information that we can so that we can see patterns and say, not only are we going to change the process, but this supervisor is a problem because he's only disciplining, or she is only disciplining, people that are in protected categories. Or when I looked at my chart, wow, 41% of the disciplines come out of this one workstation. Right. What the heck is going on there? Like, let's have an audit of this, or let's have HR go in and make sure we give them some training. No one was doing that type of stuff, and that's what leadership and management and experience brings to the table.
Wow, that's very important to know, because as a woman, and with a lot of different backgrounds, and your parents working for the Boston Public School, you working for all these different agencies, what pushed you to run for the district attorney's office?
It goes back to my core belief in equity and fairness and justice. And what I was seeing was, even though I had amazing opportunities in my life and my parents sacrificed everything for us to go to some of the best schools in the country, and I had opportunity, I was not seeing the same in even family members of mine that were struggling with, choices that they made or circumstances that they found themselves in. And so when I saw how I was treated so well as a prosecutor when I worked for the United States as an assistant United States attorney, but when my brother was arrested and brought into that same courtroom, and I walked in as a family member of a defendant, that the tone changed, and the way people looked at me was very different. And people can say, oh, you internalized that. No. No. This was very real. So if that's happening to me as the former beloved colleague of people working in that very courthouse, I can't imagine what it's like for people who have never worked with these individuals, et cetera. And there were for sure people that treated me very well in that circumstance. And very candidly, it's not about me or how I was feeling.
Right.
My brother was the one that had been engaged in behavior that resulted in him being arrested and having to stand and bear the consequences of his behavior. But what I can say is that circumstance really opened my eyes to a lot of treatment that we are receiving in communities of color overwhelmingly.
Right.
And we were fortunate enough to have me in the circumstance where I could explain the process to my parents or speak to my sibling. We don't have a voice in a lot of these circumstances, and I want to change that. I want to make sure that we have a district attorney whose primary focus is community safety and justice for victims, but we can be fair and decent and respectful and equitable to every single person in the process. You know for sure in your line of work that victims are often witnesses who could then be a defendant, who
yes.
could then be a this. And what I can tell you is that we are no longer going to be judging people on the worst moment of their life. We're going to be looking at the mosaic of their life, because I know for sure I love my siblings. They are damaged, as we all are as people. And what we do in the criminal justice system right now is we brand you, literally brand you, and then remind you every single waking moment, once you've served your debt to society, of what you've done. So your Corey is your scarlet letter. It is your brand. It is, your prison issued jumpsuit that you wear every day when you leave incarceration, because you can't get a job because you have a Corey, or you can't get housing because you have a Corey. We have circumstances where people have served their debt to society, come out, done well enough to get into a great school, applying for financial aid, can't get financial aid because of their record. And so that can't be right. That can't be what we want.
Especially if we want them to get back into society.
And not be a recidivist, right.
And not be, entering back into the same lifestyle that they have. And it's very important for people to know this, that no one is above the law. One day you can be a victim, next day you can be a defendant. And it sometimes kills me how, you have people you see coming in court and they feel like there's no hope. There's no hope. Some people just go with the process because that's all they know, and they have no one walking them through. And I cannot tell you enough, we all have a bad apple in a family where they've have a lot of contact with the court. But as a person who's able to make an impact in your community, what is it that we can do to make that change? To make that person know that, okay, you made a mistake, you made a silly mistake. We all encountered people who've done something silly, and now they have to deal with the repercussion. But do you keep reminding them to make them feel that, you're not good enough?
Yeah, hearing you use the word no hope, first and foremost, nobody in the system looks like them, right? And I'm in the system, I don't mean the criminal, I don't mean at the Suffolk County House of Corrections, for example, everyone looks like them, right? But I mean, let's take Dorchester District Court. When you walk in and you go through those detectors, right, metal detectors, you might see two individuals standing there that could possibly be a person of color there. But I feel Dorchester is different because there's Judge Georges and there's Judge Tynes there. Excellent judges, right.
Excellent
Shout
judges.
out to Judge Serge Georges Jr. Haitian judge, amazing, right?
Yes,
Anyways,
talented,
talented, wonderful lawyer. But my point is that's an anomaly, right? It is very rare that two of these sitting judges are people that could be relatives of the very, very frequent number of individuals that are standing as a defendant there. But I will say that overwhelmingly, the assistant district attorneys that are prosecuting the case, the probation officers, the other people that you interact with every single day, if you are brought before the system, don't look like you, don't live near you, don't understand your culture, know nothing about you whatsoever, and very candidly have very little interest in learning anything about you.
Right.
Because what has happened is we've turned into this system where you're a number. It's not even about your race or but you're a number.
You become a docket.
And right, a docket, and it's just a revolving door of faces, many of them brown, or black, in people in front of you, and we are critical and we are cynical, and we need to change that, right? We need to change that mentality in the DA's office, and I think that starts significantly with training. There's a wonderful man named Adam Foss.
Oh, yeah, I worked with him.
Yes. So Adam was an assistant district attorney in Suffolk County for a while, left there to start prosecutor integrity, and a great program where he goes around the country and world, right, to talk to them about the power of the prosecutor, but also to train them in implicit bias,
Right.
trauma, right, how trauma and violence affect people differently. Other matters with respect to cultural, understanding the culture of where you're working,
Right.
The history of, if you're stationed in Dorchester District Court, the history of Dorchester, right? Not a 17-year history, like, program that you have to go through, but
Right.
a few hours on what the
Get to
community
know.
has changed, how the
Right.
community has changed, the demographics, what different populations there are. You think about the fact that in Boston Public Schools right now, over 50% of the English language learners in the program speak Spanish. 7% Haitian Creole, 7% Cape Verdean Creole, I think 5% Chinese, 5% Vietnamese. So overwhelmingly Spanish, but those other numbers talk about a growing, really strong, vibrant group of people that are here and are our neighbors, are our friends. We worship together, our kids go to school together. We need to make sure, not just in schools, but in the criminal justice system, that you are able to fully participate. And if you can't understand what's happening,
right.
like, how is that even possible that you can feel like you're on equal footing or able to stand up and voice what it is that occurred?
Not to cut you off, when I was working for the DA's office, I could not tell you how many times I've heard from victims who are going through something at the time of the incident that they're in. Oh, you don't look like me. Oh, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't relate to me. You're not from where I'm from. So how can you help me? And it kind of saddens me. I know that the prosecutor's doing everything that they can, but there is this underlying issue where there's a misconnection where someone would think that you don't understand what I'm going through because you don't look like me or you're not from where I'm from.
Right. I get it. But I will say, I think there are some people that do it very well. I mentioned Chief Keyes and Chelsea. I will say Commissioner Evans with Chief Gross.
Yes,
They're
doing
the
everything.
mayor is smart enough to understand that this, in particular with his mayoral race in 2013 and having 3 or 4 strong candidates of color that were vying for that position as well, we are a changing city.
Yes.
And not just in Boston, but in Chelsea and Winthrop and Revere, all of Suffolk County, we're changing, and we need to adapt to those times. And so the fact that we are now in a situation, and I'm proud of this, I'll say this, we are in a situation where there are 6 people running for Suffolk County DA. 3 of them are women, 3 of them are people of color. And although I believe I'm the strongest candidate, and I hope I get your vote, I am really proud that Suffolk County is seeing strong women stand up who have experience in this field, and we might not agree on everything, but I am proud that there are strong and powerful women standing up and saying, why not me? And I'm equally as proud that there are people of color standing up and saying, you know what? we are the biggest user of this system, and
Right.
nobody cares about our voice. Let's have our voice be heard. What I'm excited about for myself is that I really have seen the criminal justice system at every single angle. Prosecutor for 7 years, criminal defense attorney while I was at Bingham McCutcheon. I've done civil rights work and sued the police in the city of Boston and other cities and the Commonwealth when they weren't behaving the way they should have. While I was a member of the civil rights unit at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I've also worked very closely with the police because as the head lawyer at Massport, the MBTA and MassDOT, we had police forces that worked with us. But I have family members that
Right.
struggle with addiction, that have been in and out of state and federal institutions and served time there. And that is a lived experience that not anyone else in this race can really say that they have.
Right.
And I bring all of that along with my extensive managerial experience at MassDOT and the T. Over 150 employees reported up to me in 6 different departments, many of them lawyers. People don't understand that the Suffolk County DA's office has 275 employees, $19 million budget, and they handle 35,000 cases a year. So whoever you have sitting here, they can sound wonderful telling
Right.
you what they're going to do and how they want to do it.
But you just
if
gotta wait,
you've
yeah.
never managed a group of people before, and there are a few that have managed 13 people or 17 people, the 13 people, none of them were lawyers, and the 17 people, some of them were this is 275 people. This is 35,000 cases a year. At the T, I was responsible for thousands of cases a year.
Right.
Me, not the Attorney General's office. We didn't get to push it off as a state agency. As an authority, your general counsel is responsible for those cases. So my lawyers were handling them and my outside counsel. I have done this work. I am excited and honored to try to put my name in forward to do it, but don't be fooled by promises. You need proven results
Facts.
and proven experience, and that is what I have. Firmly, I would say.
For those who are listening in and tuning in, it's your vote and your voice. Rachel, you've given us so much information about you on a personal note. I know that you have a personal testimony, and it's important for the community to know. Like you stated, a lot of people can come up and say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, but do you have the experience? Do you have the compassion? Do you actually have something that impacted you that made you want to do something for your community?
Yeah. As I said to you before, when I was the chief legal counsel at Massport, my phone rang one day and my life changed. Nobody died, which is a wonderful thing, but one of my siblings was going into crisis and their child was going to go into DCF custody. And I said, oh, of course not. I'll take my niece in. And then 2 weeks later, the same call happened for another niece. And so I am the guardian of 2 of my nieces that have extensive DCF involvement in their life. So with all of these, this accreditation and all of this polish that people might think that I have, or even to say, oh, well, she talks about her credentials so much, is she being cocky? As people of color and women, we have to remind people about what it is we've done. Other individuals have the benefit of assumptions that they are exceptional just by looking at who they are and what they are. I don't have that benefit. So I have to make sure that people know my experience and qualifications. But more importantly for me, I stepped up when crisis happened in my family. I am the guardian of 2 of my nieces. I have DCF involvement in my life. I know what foster care reviews are like.
I know what you mean.
I know what it means to get calls from school because a child who's been ripped away from their family through no fault of their own is acting out in school. And the stress you feel as somebody who's working your job, having to deal with these other issues, and that level of multitasking, and also being, performing at the highest level in your job while you're also dealing with crisis there. So those situations, and then again, there was definitely at points in my life shame that I felt regarding some of the choices that my siblings had made, or being incarcerated, and people asking, oh, how's
Right.
Matthew or Jonathan doing? But I realized they are not defined by that moment. Mm-hmm. There are many more people than you would even imagine that have similar situations that don't look like you or I. Mm-hmm. And that's their story to tell. Right. What I can tell you is that it has impacted our family. I can tell you that there was not a lot of compassion shown in the process, and I have hired and fired dozens of people. I have fired people and treated them with dignity and respect in the process. When you engage in progressive discipline, when you treat people with respect or tell them when they are doing a great job or when they are not doing a great job, when your job evaluations are done timely, and
right.
It's not that hard to let somebody go who's not doing their job. Mm-hmm. I do believe you need to give them the opportunity to prove themselves or correct their behavior, but I don't think we do that with individuals that are defendants.
Or in a life
or a cycle
exactly.
of and living in a world that sometimes you and I couldn't even imagine. So you go back to this no hope comment you made. There's no hope because either they're suffering from trauma, because there are entire swaths of communities in Suffolk County that I believe firmly have PTSD because there's been 3 or 4 homicides in a 2-block radius
right.
in the last 2 years, right? Or young children that it's not unusual for them to say, oh, my friend was murdered. You're 15 years old.
Right.
That is the norm for a lot of children in Suffolk County, that they know somebody who's been deported or shot or stabbed or the victim of violence. There is police involvement in their life, and not in a positive way. Yeah. And we need to change that. We need to make sure that we are getting people the services they need. You need a DA that is not only hyper-focused on criminal justice reform. And, I brought with me the criminal justice reform, the 3 bills that were passed into law, and, reading them and make sure I understand those. But you need a DA that is standing up in the education system and saying, I need to be heard here too, because the school to prison pipeline is ending.
Right.
Thanks to the legislature, but I'm now here to implement it, because you and I both know there are laws on the books that aren't being implemented right now. So if we don't have somebody who knows how to draft policies and procedures and train people and implement them, this will all be for naught. Right. That's number 1. Number 2, with respect to health and mental health, we need a DA that's going to stand up and say, I want more training for my ADAs on trauma and my victim witness advocates on trauma. And then most importantly, I believe, more even than health and education, is housing. Because when you don't have a place...
Housing is number 1 issue.
To live or lay your head at the end of the night. How can we be surprised? When you don't have an address, you can't get a job, right? And just a safe place to go and rest yourself. Right. We need somebody who's speaking up there, and I'm proud of the work I've done with mass housing, on reentry housing there. But I will say, all of this is exciting for me. I'm very passionate about the work that we're doing. I've been really fortunate that the architect of this criminal justice reform bill, mm-hmm. Senator William Brownsberger, who literally for years worked on these bills, just endorsed me. We got the Teamsters Local 25
That's
endorsement,
awesome.
Which is huge. Mass Women's Political Caucus. Several other big ones I think are going to be coming out shortly. So we're gaining momentum. Mm-hmm. We're excited. We have a new headquarters in JP, so if anyone's watching, swing by 376 Center Street in Jamaica Plain. I think we have a really good shot of being successful, and the most important part, though, for me, is that people get to hear about the office.
And I think it's good to, for people to get to hear your own personal story from your own mouth. You've given so much information today. People may not know. Today's the first time we're meeting each other, and I've been touched by everything that you've said. We have similar stories, and where we have things more in common than I really thought. And it's very important for people who are listening in and tuning into this broadcast today to learn more about you, and to you know, like you stated on your website, your vote, your voice.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that you're here because you have so much information, and we could go for hours and hours, but we're limited with time.
Yep.
But please, this is not an endorsement, but this is just to let people know, get to know your DAs, get to know what they're doing in the community, get to know what they have done. And if there's a personal relationship within the community, then that's someone that can do what you are looking for them to do. And lastly, Rachel, can you please give us any upcoming information that you're having, any events, your website, anything where people can go and learn more about you?
Excellent. Yeah. So my website is Rollins, the number 4 DA. So ROLLINS, the number 4 DA. I would love you guys to swing by our headquarters. We're there all the time. Again, we're in Jamaica Plain. We are at 376 Center Street. We do have on the website a calendar of events that are coming up. I'm going to be at JP Porch Fest today, marching around and meeting people in our neighborhood. The Chelsea Collaborative is hosting a forum on Tuesday, July 10th to discuss Latinx issues. And if you guys are around and want to go to that, I would welcome your presence there. And you know, just check us out. We're really excited to answer whatever questions you have. Go on our website, email us, do anything. We'll respond.
Thank you, Rachel, so much. And for all our listeners that are listening in, thank you. Please send your questions to me. I'll be more than happy to try to answer them.
Yeah.
My
And
email.
vote on September 4th.
Yes,
It's
please
Tuesday
vote.
after Labor Day. I hope you vote for me, but even if it's not for me, you must vote. You must.
You can always email me, voiceofreasonboston@gmail.com. And you can also go to my Facebook page and Instagram page, Voice of Reason Boston, and Facebook, Voice of Reason Boston. Thank you for tuning in. I would love to hear more from you all, and thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.